DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence, put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, that is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we get into another series. Y'all don't mind, I just like doing these series. Sometimes I got more than just a few points that I need to get off when it comes to these topics. Topic here, the most common logical fallacies. And this is going to be a 4-part series. Before we get into this, let me remind you all two things. First of all, my daily motivation, Monday motivation messages, guaranteed to have you focus, sharp, and on point, start your day or your week respectively. All you got to do to get these is be a member of my texting community. And once we start sending that message out again, you'll be getting those messages straight to your phone. My number is 305-384-6894. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. Those of you who know that it's time to get serious about your growth, about moving yourself forward business-wise, professionally, personally, and everywhere in between, and you know it's time that you do something about this right now, not now, but right now, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. The link is down below in the description to this episode. Now, getting into this topic, the most common logical fallacies. Now, logical fallacies is something that I find myself pointing out often when I'm engaging in conversation with people, specifically when I'm on social media. And social media, was a place where people tend to get much more emotional over subjects and therefore more prone to logical fallacies, because logic and emotion tend to sometimes be diametrically opposed to each other. Even though they can be used together, they often are not. They often don't show up together. Usually, if you're using one, you're not using the other. That's usually how it works. So first of all, let me give you a definition of a logical fallacy. This is coming from Scribber.com. Quote, a logical fallacy is an argument that may sound convincing or true, but is actually flawed. Logical fallacies are leaps of logic that lead us to an unsupported conclusion. People may commit a logical fallacy unintentionally due to poor reasoning, or intentionally in order to manipulate others. In my experience, and I'm out of the definition now. In my experience, people commit logical fallacies both unintentionally and on purpose, and they do it often at the same time. That's what I usually notice. People commit logical fallacies simply because their logic is flawed. Many people are just not good at formulating arguments. And when I say argument, I don't mean argument like a combative conversation between two people. When I say an argument, what I mean is, can you make your point in such a way that people can understand what you're saying? And I talk about using arguments in episode 2078. Examples do not prove arguments. Episode number 1612, how to formulate and present a logical argument. In episode 1424, seeing both sides of any argument. So I've broken down the concept of arguments several times here on the show. And today I'm going to go into that over this series. I'm going to talk about arguments a lot, because logical fallacies usually come up when people are either trying to persuade or influence in making a point, or when people are disagreeing on a point. That's usually when they pop up. And again, as I said, many people commit fallacies simply because they don't have the skill of reasoning out or verbalizing their reason. And many times people do it on purpose because they're just trying to manipulate or control or influence a conversation. So they commit logical fallacies, don't even realize that they're doing it. So sometimes people know exactly what they're saying, but don't realize that what they're doing is, again, fallacious in terms of following logic. So I'm going to serve the greater good of the public here in this series by explaining to you over this 4-part series the most common logical fallacies that I come across and that you come across as well. But again, some of you either A, don't recognize these as logical fallacies, but once I point them out, you're going to know exactly what I mean, and or B, you have committed these yourself and didn't even realize that you were doing it. But now that you'll be aware of them, you can be more cognizant and make sure you don't make these mistakes. I'm also going to share with you how to refute these logical fallacies, because these are things that people often use in conversation, especially when there is a disagreement or someone is looking to influence or persuade you. And you may note that there is some flaw in the logic of what they're saying, but if you can't point it out and identify it, then it'll be hard for you to combat it. So that's what I'm going to do here in this series. You ready for this? Buckle up. Point number 1. Topic, once again, is the most common logical fallacies. Again, this is part 1 of 4. First one is called the ad hominem logical fallacy. Ad hominem, A-D space H-O-M-I-E-M, the ad hominem logical fallacy. So ad hominem simply means attacking the person rather than addressing the point. That's what an ad hominem logical fallacy is. Has any of you ever had this happen to you? Any of you ever had a person attack you just because they disagree with a point you made? I talk about this in episode number 2040. Judge the point, not the person. In other words, I'm telling you to do the opposite of what an ad hominem logical fallacy does. Example of this would be if you told someone that there was a misspelling on their website. They say, hey, I was on your website and I noticed this misspelling. You even took a screenshot of it and circled the misspelling. And they replied by telling you, well, what do you know about websites and what do you know about business? All right, that's an ad hominem response to what you said, because what you said was about a misspelling on their website, which you just showed them, but they responded by talking about you instead of talking about the point. You get it? That's an ad hominem logical fallacy. That's a simple example, but people do this all the time. I mean, when I say all the time, I mean all the time. Get into a disagreement with a person, especially someone who you don't really know, let's say on the internet, and ad hominem fallacies usually start coming out within 2 or 3 exchanges, sometimes even sooner than that. One has nothing to do with the other, because the person, again, when they're using an ad hominem fallacy, they're attacking who you are rather than addressing the thing that you said. And again, the thing that you said is a misspelling on their website. Who you are personally has absolutely nothing to do with the point. It doesn't matter who pointed it out. Right? But someone who knows a lot about business and a lot about websites pointed it out, it will still be true. So this one is often used, again, people often use this by default. Usually, in my experience, these are the lowest level of intelligence individuals use these. And I'll just say it like that because that's what I see. The lowest level of intelligence people use the ad hominem because they don't even try to make a show of addressing your point. They just go immediately to attacking you personally. And the reason why the ad hominem logical fallacy is effective is because when you attack a person personally, most people tend to respond to that personal attack by defending themselves. And they can defend themselves either by refuting what you said or they will start attacking you. So now what has happened? Person using ad hominem logical fallacy to attack the person, to attack the counterpart rather than attacking the point that was being made. Then the counterpart responds by attacking you back. And now the conversation is about you two attacking each other and the point never gets addressed. This is why the ad hominem fallacy is so effective. If you want to see an example of this, if you've been following the 2024 presidential campaign, there's it's a little bit tangential, but it is a good example. At the very beginning of the debate, the one debate as of this recording that ever happened between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, one of the things that Kamala Harris said early in the debate was, if you look at Donald Trump's campaign rallies, people leave his rallies because they're boring and they're not interesting or whatever it is that she said. And the thing that she said about the campaign rallies had nothing to do with the question that she was asked, which is another tactic that politicians use all the time. All politicians do it. But she used it and started talking about Donald Trump's campaign rallies, which had nothing to do with the question that was being asked. And Donald Trump could have easily just ignored it or brushed it off. But Donald Trump, because it seemed to impugn on his ego, he decided to take the bait and he started defending his campaign rallies, which was silly. Donald Trump did not need to do that. But he did do it, and that is an example of an ad hominem. She started talking about his rallies, which had nothing to do with, again, the question that was asked was about something completely different than what she ended up talking about, and Donald Trump took the bait. Now, see, had he ignored the bait, he could have just said, I have no idea why she is talking about my campaign rallies when the question was about the economy or the question was about immigration or about infrastructure. She's already changing the subject because any answer that she gives to the actual question is going to make her look bad, but she looks bad anyway by trying to change the subject. Now that I pointed it out, she can't hide. That's what he could have said, but he didn't do that because he lost his logical frame when he got personally attacked. And some people are more susceptible to reacting to personal attack than others. And Donald Trump actually happens to be one of those people who is very susceptible to this because he will usually defend his ego when someone attacks him on a personal level. And Kamala Harris set that bait perfectly. I would say during the course of that debate that they had, that was probably her highest point, was at the very beginning when she was able to do that. I don't think the rest of it went too well for her. That's just my opinion, but that's not the topic here today. So again, as I said, the reason the ad hominem attack is successful is usually people take the bait and they start defending themselves personally. So next time someone makes a point that you don't want to address, you can just attack them personally and usually they'll forget about the point. But I'm being tongue-in-cheek, I'm being facetious when I say that. But what I'm telling you is you need to be careful of people doing this to you, because every human has some part of their psyche, part of their ego that they really don't like people attacking, and they tend to take the bait if someone attacks that thing. So you got to be careful if someone attacks that thing in you, because it will cause you to lose the plot and not keep the focus on the actual point that needs to be being addressed. That usually when an ad hominem attack comes out, the point gets completely ignored because people change the subject. They change the subject successfully, something that had nothing to do with the topic. Moving on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the most common logical fallacies. Number 2 is the straw man fallacy. What is a straw man? So a straw man comes from the concept of actually building a man out of straw. And if I showed any of you a man that was made out of straw and said, beat up this man, it'd be very easy for you to beat it up. Because first of all, it's made out of straw, which means any of you, even if you're not that physically powerful, you can probably knock it down and beat it up and tear it to pieces. And a straw man does not hit back. So you have no chances of losing because all you got to do is knock it down and it's not going to fight back. That's the concept of a straw man. So a straw man means you are misrepresenting or oversimplifying someone's argument and then attacking or refuting something that they didn't even say. So in other words, you're taking a point that I made, which was a solid point, then you're creating a different version of my point that is easier for you to address, and then you're beating up the different version and then saying, well, see, I knocked down your point. And I'm saying, well, that's not even what I said. That's a straw man argument. And again, this is one that gets used often as well, especially when you corner someone into a position where they can't answer your question directly, because if they did, they're going to quote unquote lose or look bad either way, no matter how they answer it. So what they do is to set up a straw man to try to distract you and change the subject. And again, you'll notice that a lot of logical fallacies as we go through the series, often they are used to distract and throw you off the scent of where you were going, because where you were going had them cornered and they didn't have a good answer for it. So they changed the subject by using these logical fallacies. That's why you have to be careful of being able to notice the logical fallacies so you can point them out and redirect them and bring them right back to where you want people to be, especially when you basically had them by the balls and you're basically nailing them into a corner. So this is something that trial lawyers have to be really good at, because it allows you to kind of pin people down in the corner and they can't get out. So if I'm let me give you an example of a straw man argument, straw man fallacy. I'm speaking to someone who's let's say you're a strict vegan. I am plant-based, but I'm not a vegan. But let's say I'm talking to someone who's a strict vegan. And I tell them that I like to eat plant-based, but that also means that sometimes I'll eat cheeseburgers and bacon and what's another animal product, and fish. Let's say that I say that to somebody. So what does the straw man argument response sound like? That'd be with them saying, hey, Dre, are you saying that you don't care about animals being slaughtered and destroyed every single day and the environment being torn to pieces just so people like you can eat burgers and eat T-bone steaks? Why would you think that way, Dre? That's really terrible. That's a straw man argument, because that's not what I said. What I said is I'm plant-based and sometimes I eat burgers and steak. Me saying that I eat burgers and steak does not mean that I want animals to be slaughtered every day, and it doesn't mean I want to destroy the environment. So when someone says you eating burgers and steaks means you want animals to be slaughtered every day just for food and you want to destroy the environment, that's a straw man argument, because that's not what I said. Now, is me eating burgers and steaks leading to possibly more animals being slaughtered and possibly the destruction of the environment? Maybe, but did I say that? No. So you can't put that on me and then say, well, that's terrible that you're doing that. See, that's also known as emotional blackmail. So it's like telling someone that you are emotionally hurting them and therefore you need to stop doing what you're doing, or you need to basically condemn whatever you have done or what somebody else done. Otherwise, if you don't do it, then you're emotionally hurting me. This is bullshit. That's a nonsense argument. It's a form of a straw man argument, and people use this all the time. So you have to be very careful with this. I'm sure it's going to come up in our series here as we talk about, but we'll come back to that. So what makes a straw man, anything a straw man argument, is again when a person is either claiming that they have knocked down something that you didn't say, or they're asking you to respond to something that you didn't say. And this is, again, the form of a straw man. So I say I like to eat burgers, and the person says, oh, so explain to me, Dre, why you don't care about the environment being destroyed. I'm like, I never said that. I said I eat cheeseburgers. And then she says, well, when you eat cheeseburgers, you're destroying the environment. So clearly you don't care about the environment. So explain why you're okay with the environment being destroyed. That's a form of a straw man. And one of the things about logical fallacies I should also mention to you all is that you need to watch for these, especially people who are slick talkers, fast talkers, and are very good at verbalizing their thoughts. Because these are people who you should be on a debate team somewhere, because this is what they're really good at. It's just verbally talking circles around other people. So when you come across people who are really good at that, you either A, need to become one yourself, or B, you need to be careful getting into back and forth with these people, because they're usually better at the verbalizing than you. Doesn't mean they made a better point, but if they can talk really fast and they can put together a lot of points at the same time, they can verbally overwhelm you before you even get a chance to process what they said. They're already on to the next point. And then it can look like, especially if this is happening publicly, it can look like they're quote unquote beating you in the conversation, even though they're saying a whole bunch of bullshit. So you got to be careful with this. What I would suggest you do, if you're not that type yourself, is to slow down. And anytime that they say something, just slow down and control the pace of the conversation rather than letting them run away with it and turn it into a sprint. Because again, people who are really good at that, they do this they're used to doing this. They wake up in the morning looking for someone to do this too. So you got to be very careful of these individuals, again, unless you happen to be one of them. If you're not one of them, be very careful of them, because they will talk circles around you and make you feel like you're an idiot for not understanding their eloquence. So straw man is an argument that is often successful because, again, the person who is the recipient of a straw man fallacy does not even realize that a straw man fallacy was used against them. And this is usually why logical fallacies are successful. Usually when a logical fallacy is successful, is the person doesn't realize what's happening. They don't realize what's being done to them. So you don't realize an ad hominem because you're reacting so much to the fact that someone attacked you personally, you don't even realize that they changed the subject from the point that you made. You don't realize that someone's making a straw man argument because they're asking you to refute something that you didn't even say, but you take the bait of starting to respond to that instead of keeping the subject on what it was. Like, hey, I didn't even say that. Here's what I said. Please respond to what I actually said, not your version of what I said. And often you have to call out someone doing the logical fallacy so that they know that you know they're trying to pull some bullshit on you. And they usually stop once you point it out. In my experience, that's what happens. Now, if you don't point it out, they'll just keep trying it until they find one that works. And I'm doing a 4-part series on this for a reason, because there's a lot of them. All right, so you got to be very careful with this shit. So many people do not realize the straw man is happening. You fail to identify it. And then again, you go down the rabbit hole about arguing something that you didn't even say. So if someone says to me, Dre, you like cheeseburgers, that means you don't care about the destruction of the environment. Tell me why that's okay. And if I respond to that and start talking about the environment, they just took me off of the scent of what I was saying. I was saying something completely different, and now I'm having their conversation instead of my conversation. You see how that works? See, one of the tells for the straw man, if you want to have a simple cue that you can use for noticing when someone's using a straw man argument, it often starts with them using the word so, or so you're saying. Whenever someone starts a response to you by saying so or so you're saying, again, I'm not saying every time they do it, but you should be very wary of this. These phrases are dead giveaways that someone is about to rephrase something that was said and rephrase it into a form in which they can attack, rather than responding to what was actually said. What I tell people, because I happen to be a wordsmith type of person, I'm the type of person I'm good verbally, and I don't mind getting in back and forth verbal confrontations with people, because I can handle them. Even people who try to talk circles around, I can deal with these people. Whenever I see someone doing that and they try to rephrase what I said, one of the things that I will always say to people is, I make a living with my words. And I'm not joking. I do make a living with my words. And I will subsequently say to them, I don't need you to rephrase what I said, because I said it exactly as it needed to be said. So respond to what I actually said, not your version of what I said. And I'm pointing out their straw man without calling it a straw man. And I can call it a straw man if I want to. But those of you who are precise in your verbiage, and these logical fallacies, one of the reasons why you should be precise in your verbiage, because again, people will use it against you if you're not precise, and they are precise. Even when they're bullshitting, people can be precise in bullshit. All right, so you got to be careful. If you're not precise in your verbiage, I suggest you get more precise. This is the reason why I emphasize communication skills so much around here. Communication skills are future-proof ability, and they will always make everything you do better. They're a force multiplier. You want to be able to put your thoughts into words articulately and cleanly, such that you don't need your words to be said in another way other than how you said them. Therefore, it is impossible for someone to straw man your point, because you can just simply say to them, I said that exactly as it needed to be said. Don't rephrase me. And once you tell someone that, they usually won't do it again, because now you pointed it out. So now they can't act like they don't know what they're doing. So be careful with this. Again, the tell is so or so you're saying. They're about to rephrase what you said. And if someone is disagreeing with you, they will often straw man your point, again, to make it something completely different from what you said. And again, let me remind you again, it's a tell for a straw man, is not proof. So sometimes someone says so or so you're saying, and they won't straw man you. So don't think just because someone does this that they're straw man you. Sometimes your statement does need to be rephrased for better understanding and better comprehension. But people will also do this to reframe your point into something different, which is more malicious. So you just got to be aware of the possibilities. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is the most common logical fallacies. It's going to be a 4-part series. This is part number 1. Number 3, the appeal to authority logical fallacy. What is the appeal to authority? The appeal to authority fallacy is that assuming that something is true or that it should be followed or accepted just because someone who has a position of authority has said so, without considering the validity of the point itself. So just as I told you earlier, the ad hominem is attacking the point, not the person. The appeal to authority is kind of the inverse of that. It's accepting the point because of the person. And that is a fallacy. Accepting a point just because a certain person said it is a fallacious way of thinking. Or saying that this must be true because this person said it is a fallacious way of thinking. And this one is hard for many people to wrap their minds around because, especially those of you who are adults, you spent the majority of your life respecting and honoring and trusting any authority who was in front of you, whether that's a religious leader, a teacher, a doctor, a police officer, a parent, a coach. You are taught to respect authority. And therefore, when someone who appears to have a position of authority says something to you, your default is to respond to it and obey their orders or obey their commands or obey their wishes. But this is actually a fallacious way of thinking. Again, it's not that any person in authority, you should just ignore them outright. But just because someone in a position of authority says something does not mean that it's true. A person with a position of authority can be challenged just like anyone else can be challenged. Now, you need to be smart about who you challenge, when, and why, and where. All right, respect the authority of the position that you have relative to the position that they have. But do not think that you should accept anything just because someone with authority says it. And I mean, I can give you plenty of examples of this. Many of you can probably think of a few in your own life. In the world that we live in now, there are a bunch of them happening. I remember I was talking to a friend a year or two ago, and he was telling me that he was taking his son to get all types of vaccine shots at the doctor. And our kids are about the same age. So he said to me, are you taking your kid to get the same shots? And I told him that we are not getting any of those shots for our child. And he began to challenge me on that line of reasoning, saying, well, how are you going to take your kid to school? I said, my kid ain't going to school. Or he's going to work on your game university. I don't need to take my kid to school, so we don't need those shots. Then he started asking me about, well, what about them getting sick? I said, well, my kid's not getting sick, and getting those shots does not guarantee the kid doesn't get sick. Kids still get sick. So he kept challenging me on these things. Ultimately, after asking a few questions that I calmly pushed back against, he finally settled on the following. He said, well, Dre, I know that you're not a doctor, and you know that I'm not a doctor. This is my friend talking to me. And he says, since neither of us are doctors, why would either of us decide to do something other than what the doctor says? That question right there is the appeal to authority. Did you catch it? He said, you're not a doctor, I'm not a doctor, so that means anything the doctor says, both of us should listen. That's bullshit. No, we shouldn't. I'm not listening to something just because the doctor said it. I told you all more than once some stories about doctors telling me things that ended up being complete bullshit. Let me give you an example. First of all, episode number 2338, I trashed the American medical system. It is trash, and I trashed it. It deserves to be trashed, and I will trash it again in the future. I have told you all the story in that episode. I told you the story of when my son was born, and we took him to the hospital briefly. He was born at home, but we took him to the hospital briefly because we wanted to make sure he hadn't ingested any meconium into his lungs. Meconium is basically baby poop that they're not supposed to poop till they are born, but he had pooped before he came out of the womb. So we took him just for that, and the amount of shenanigans we had to deal with just for that was enough to get me riled up to. I wrote a whole article about this called "The True Story of My Son's Birth," and to trash the medical system in episode number 2338. There were so many appeal to authority fallacies. The entire hospital itself is an appeal to authority fallacy. Everybody in there, the security guards, the nurses, the doctors, everybody in there is just one big appeal to authority fallacy. It's all designed to make you appeal or to bow to the quote unquote authority of those people. But they realize within less than 24 hours, this guy is not one to bow to authority, referring to myself. But anyway, so that's one. Secondly, over the last 4 or 5 years, you all remember that virus that was around, right? And you were told that you need to get one of those shots because if you got the shot, we all had come to understand and accept that if you get the V word, that means you will not get the virus. Isn't that what it was commonly accepted? I mean, up until the year 2020, was it not commonly accepted that if you get the V word, that jab, that means whatever you have been V worded against, you won't get that virus? Was that not the commonly accepted knowledge. I think we all accepted that as the truth. They developed a V word, a jab for this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and that's why we no longer have this thing. But people are going out and getting the jab for this virus, and they were still getting the sickness. When that happened, there were a few people, I would say of 100% of people, I'd say about 10%, maybe 10%, maybe 20% of people said, wait a minute, this is some bullshit. We always came to believe that getting the jab meant this. Now getting the jab doesn't mean that. That means, and they came to the following conclusion, that the medical system will lie to you just to push something on you. Some people came to that conclusion. Other people who had the same information, but they weren't willing to consciously admit it because they took all the jabs, they said, oh, well, they changed the definition of what a jab is. That means when you get the jab, this means it won't be as bad and you'll survive it more easily than if you didn't have it. And I know there's some people who I know, love, and trust who I heard saying this bullshit because they are reflections of the appeals to authority. And these are people who I know who always get sick. They always get more sick than everybody else. They went and got all the shots, like as many as you were supposed to get, the original ones and the boosters. Still got sick. Were sick for months. And then they said, well, good thing I had the jab because it would have been worse. Like, I'm like, are you serious? But this is how people think. Because again, you've been raised your entire life to respect any authority and bow to whatever an authority says, then you ain't gonna stop now. So again, this, my friend telling me, hey, why don't you do what the doctor says? I don't give a fuck what the doctor says. I'm the parent. The doctor does not have more authority than me. So I'm the authority. So the appeal to authority is me appealing to myself. So anyway, during the scamdemic, and yes, I said scamdemic, you know all this happened. A scientist or a doctor told you to do it, you just do it. Now again, you all know better now, don't you? I'm just let that question sit in the air. You all know better now, don't you? All right, the government told you to do it. Okay, you all know better now, don't you? All right, hopefully many of you learned that the appeal to authority is a very powerful frame when you do not recognize that it's being used on you. So again, go back to the story of me talking to my friend. It sounds kind of funny the way I'm explaining it, but this is exactly how it happened. That is literally what he said. I said, you're not a doctor, so why are you not doing what the doctor says? And my response was, I don't do what someone in a position of authority says because they said it. I question everything, no matter who it came from, and it doesn't mean the doctor might not be right, but I'm going to verify that the doctor's right. I'm not going to take the doctor's words because the doctor said it. Because again, I'm the final authority on what's going to happen with me or my child, not the doctor. And I told you all the story also. I had a knee issue about early 2021. I went to a doctor, a renowned orthopedist down here in Miami. He's known as like the doctor for the Miami Heat, and he checks out people's knees and bones and all that stuff. And I sat and met with this guy, paid him like $450 and talked to him for like 5 minutes. And his prescription for what I needed to do for my knee was he was going to put a shot of it. It was either cortisol or cortisone. I don't know which one it was. Basically going to destabilize your knee for like 6 weeks. And you're going to put your knee in a cast, basically, or whatever that thing is. You're like not a cast, but like a brace, where you can't bend the knee. And you're going to wear that for 6 weeks. Then the swelling will have gone down. And then I'm going to send you to my guy who's a physical therapist. Then after about 6 weeks of that, then you'll be able to run again after 12 weeks. That was his prescription for me. I said, there's no way this is what I need to be doing for this. I said, this can't be right. So I reached out to my trainer who trained me when I was playing. Her name is Maria. And I said to her, hey, I went to a doctor and this is the issue. And he said this. What do you think about that? And she started telling me how she had been run through the ringer by doctors for other things in the past. And she is not a big proponent of the medical system either. Makes perfect sense that we have become friends. And she said, well, listen, I'm not here. I'm not in Miami right now, but you should go see Brian. And I hadn't thought about Brian. I knew Brian, but I had forgot about him. She said, go see Brian. He could probably help you. I reached out to Brian. I told him what the issue was. I told him what the doctor said. And Brian said, come see me. I went and saw Brian. I paid him like $150 for a 1-hour session. He showed me about 6 or 7 exercises that I could do for my knees that would alleviate the pain and get it back working. I have not had a single knee problem since. Now, had I followed what the doctor said, I would have taken some foreign agent into my body, that shot that he was saying, which is a foreign agent that doesn't naturally occur, it's bullshit. Then been destabilized for 6 weeks, then going to some physical therapist. Brian himself is a physical therapist, going to some other physical therapist, or maybe that physical therapist may have been great, but I didn't need him. All I did was go see Brian for literally an hour and paid this dude $100. And he showed me the exercise I could do by myself to take me 10 minutes a day. I've been doing them ever since. I haven't had a single knee issue. Point is, these examples that I'm giving you here are more reasons why I do not trust people in positions of authority, regardless of who they are. Doesn't mean I will not listen to them, but I do not trust what you say just because of your status. And none of you should do this. None of you should trust what someone says just because of their status, because people will deceive you because of this. They'll deceive you behind this. And the reason this happens is many people simply don't think for themselves. The world that we live in today is imperative that you think for yourself and get your own information. Doesn't mean you can't take in knowledge from others, but you ultimately must make your own decisions based on your own independent thought process. Good news is, in the world that we're in today, you can basically fact check anything that anybody tells you. For most people, what I just explained is too much work, which is why most people would rather just listen to what the authority says rather than doing the work of actually thinking. But I'm thinking there's some people listening to this who will do the work of actually thinking. That's why I got to put it out there. I can't save everybody, but I'll save the ones who are swimming towards the boat. With all that said, let's recap today's class, which is the first of our 4-part series. Most common logical fallacies. Again, an argument that sounds convincing or true, but is actually flawed, whether done intentionally or unintentionally. Either way is a fallacy. Number 1 is the ad hominem fallacy. This is when you attack the person rather than attacking the point. Be careful of this, because when someone attacks you personally, you tend to forget about the point you were trying to make and defend yourself. Don't fall for the trap. Number 2, the straw man argument. Misrepresenting or oversimplifying someone's argument, then attacking or refuting something that they didn't even say. This is a common one that people use when they don't want to actually deal with your argument, because your argument is too sound and airtight. So therefore, they move the goalpost and try to talk about something that you didn't say. And again, people tend to fall for this because you're like, I didn't even say that. And then you start arguing about a thing that you didn't even say. Don't fall for it. Point out to them, no, that's not what I said. Here's what I said. Respond to what I actually said, not your version of what I said. Number 3, the appeal to authority. This is when you listen to what somebody else says just because of who they are. A doctor, a nurse, a police officer, a teacher, a government official, etc. Again, I'm not saying just go against everything that these people say just because. I'm saying to question and weigh the pros and cons of anything these people say, regardless of who they are. This frame of authority is used to deceive. And many of you probably have enough examples in your life of this happening to you. You should know better than to let it keep happening. All that said, tomorrow we'll get into the next part of this series. Make sure you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com so that you can have me as your direct coach. You can put yourself in a position of authority and actually have some real substance behind your authority, so people listen to you because it makes sense, not just because of who you are, but they come to you because of who you are, because they know you. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all